Hello and welcome to another Wine Reform Mini-sode. Today we are talking about how to pair wine with food. Now it may seem elusive, but trust me, if you have taste buds, you can get it. Pairing wine with food really falls into two camps, but before we get into that, we're going to establish the 6 flavors. Food and wine can fall into these camps. Fat, bitter, sweet, spice or spiciness, salt, and acid. Now that we know about the flavors, we can talk about the 2 camps of pairing food and wine. Congruent and contrasting. Now we can all kind of surmise what contrasting means, but let's start with congruent, shall we? A congruent pairing is when your food and your wine have very similar flavors. So contrasting is when your food and your wine have opposite flavors. So you could say that a congruent pairing would probably be a spicy food with a salty wine, or a spicy food with a spicy wine, or a fatty food with a spicy wine. Those are very similar enough in flavor that they are considered congruent. Some examples of popular congruent pairings would be perhaps an oaked Chardonnay and a mac and cheese, or a Sauvignon Blanc and a salad. So really keep in mind, what am I tasting in my wine, what am I tasting in my food, and think of them just as you would cooking ingredients. If you think that they would complement each other well in a dish as similar enough in flavor, you can probably put them together as a wine and a food pairing. Now let's move on to contrasting pairing. In my personal opinion, a contrasting pairing is a lot easier to figure out and kinder to the palate, especially if you are a beginner in pairing wine with food. So contrasting pairing, that's when you're pairing the opposite flavored wine with an opposite flavored food. Some good examples of that would be a sweet wine with a spicy food, or perhaps a bubbly wine with a fatty food, or maybe a more acidic wine with a fatty food. So some examples of really good contrasting pairings would be, you could try a Riesling and a pad thai, or just a Riesling and any spicy food, a champagne with fried chicken. Champagne complements those fried buttery foods very well. Or a Cabernet Sauvignon with a Wagyu steak, or any sort of really fatty cut of meat. Now that we know the basics, then you can take the 6 flavors, fat, spice, salt, acid, sweet, and bitter, and you can do a lot of really great things with them. However, if you're not someone who feels confident then coming up with your own food pairings right away, there are some really good tips to adhere to. Other than understanding the 6 basic flavor categories, as well as understanding the difference between a congruent pairing and a contrasting pairing, there are some general pairing tips that work very well, especially if you're not quite sure what to do. Your wine should always be more acidic or more sweet than your food. If your wine is less acidic or less sweet than your food, then your food will overpower the flavor of your wine and you're not going to get to enjoy it as much. So always make sure it's more sweet or more acidic. When in doubt, put spicy food with sweet wine. Always. There is nothing worse than exacerbating the capsaicin already in your mouth, unless you like that. So if you don't want an extra dose of pain when you're eating maybe extra spicy fajitas, tacos, pad thai, or any food of the sort, I recommend a sweet wine. Any sweet wine being a Moscato, a Riesling, a dessert wine, maybe a port, but generally keep it sweet. The intensity of your food should match the intensity of your wine. And the reason for that is because you don't want one to overpower the other. You want them to work in harmony. So you're not going to have a Pinot Grigio with a pepper steak. The pepper steak would overpower the Pinot Grigio entirely, and you would barely taste the delicate wine to begin with. Now, if you're unsure of what to do, and if you're not a vegan, you pair your reds with red meat and your whites with white meat. The tannin in red wines tend to go really well with a heavier meat, like a burger or a steak or a lamb chop or anything of the sort. Just like a white wine is delicate enough that it pairs better with a more delicate meat such as chicken or fish. And something to keep in mind when you decide to try your palate at the congruent or contrasting pairings is, in general, reds make better congruent pairings, and whites, sparkling, and rosés make better contrasting pairings. Hopefully that helped you find a place to get started when you're pairing your wine with your food. I know that when the holidays are coming up, there's a lot of very big meals, and it's great to be able to share a bottle with your guests if you can have guests over, or if you have a big family. So try your palate at, pairing a fun food with a fun wine. If you're not really sure, where to begin, pick your favorite wine and then have a glass and just go around your kitchen or your pantry and try as many things as you can with that sip of wine in your mouth. So you take a sip of Chardonnay and eat a potato chip. See how it tastes, see how you like it. Maybe you could pair a Malbec with a pickle chip. See how you like it. It really comes down to personal preference, and you would be surprised what awesome pairings you could come up with. In the end, trust your palate, trust your preferences. You know your mouth better than anyone else. I hope that gave everyone a good place to start. If you enjoyed what you're seeing, please like it, subscribe, and hit the bell. Is it on this side? I think it's on this side. So like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you know when I'm putting out videos. I put out videos every other Wednesday and every Friday, and heaven forbid if I miss a day, then if you tap that bell icon, then you know when I do upload a video, even if it is a day late. Thank you for watching, and happy wine pairing. See you Friday.